Beneath the frozen crust of Antarctica, deeper than any drilling operation had ever dared go, the ground was breathing. It wasn't a metaphor. It pulsed, slow, seismic, and regular, like the beat of a slumbering god's heart. No seismograph could map it accurately. No one above ground could hear it. But those within Facility Thorn, a clandestine science military hybrid installation buried 6 kilometers down, knew it intimately. They felt it in their bones, in the walls, in their dreams. Dr. Sarah Malik had long since stopped trying to rationalize the sensation. She was a planetary geophysicist, brilliant and methodical. And yet here, all her models, thermal gradients, tectonic plate maps, core dynamics, meant nothing. What they'd found wasn't geological. It wasn't even terrestrial. The first time she saw it, she had laughed. A reflex. Her mind rejected it. The way the human brain automatically scrubs visual hallucinations from its perception. The thing embedded in the rock wasn't made of any mineral she recognized. It was black, but not dull. Light slid across it, swallowed and reborn as spectral arcs. Sharp geometric grooves ran along its hull, far too deliberate for any natural process. It spanned nearly 3 kilometers, stretching downward in a spiral like some titanic fossil. But no known fossil could emit a low-frequency vibration that rearranged the patterns of her dreams. The military called it Project Leviathan. Sarah hated the name. Mythic labels gave people the illusion of understanding. This was not a myth. This was something older than myth. Colonel Marcus Roth, the military lead on the project, didn't care for poetry. He wanted results. Answers. He had seen war, had stared down the eyes of dying men, and led teams into burning cities. Nothing rattled him until Leviathan. Sarah watched the change in him day by day. He started walking with a stiffness in his shoulders. He flinched at certain sounds, low hums, radio static, the groan of heavy steel. Once she caught him staring at the thing for a full hour, unmoving. "We shouldn't be down here," he said quietly after one such session. "We're prodding a bear asleep in a nest of stars." Sarah wanted to believe he was just being dramatic, but she couldn't, not after the dreams. Everyone who worked close to the Leviathan had them eventually. Endless spirals of dark metal, stars vanishing like dying embers. And at the center, always, a vast white eye, watching, waiting. It wasn't sleep. It was patience. Then came the signal. It was weak, almost hidden in the electromagnetic haze that surrounded the structure, but unmistakable, pulses space with mathematical precision. A pattern, a message. At first they assumed it was a remnant echo, some artifact of ancient programming. But the pulses changed, responded, adapted. Sarah's algorithms detected recursive growth in the signal, like something was listening, learning. When the pulse rate doubled, the Leviathan shuddered. Emergency lights bathed the cavern in red. Men and women scrambled through tunnels. Sarah and Ross stood alone at the observation platform, gazing down into the abyss where Leviathan lay encased in translucent permafrost. The shudder came again, stronger. This time the ice cracked. A glowing line of light ignited along the Leviathan's hull. One line became 2, then hundreds, then thousands, as if veins of molten gold had awakened beneath its surface. The glow intensified until the ice above it vaporized, rising in a roaring column of steam. "Get everyone topside," Roth ordered into his calm. "This thing's waking up." Sarah hesitated. "It's responding to something. We didn't trigger this." Roth looked at her, grim. Then something else did. 2 hours later, communications across the globe began failing. Satellites went dark. GPS signals turned to noise. The aurora exploded into existence over cities that had never seen them. Entire power grids blinked out. In the Oval Operations Room of the Pentagon, leaders from every major defense alliance stared in disbelief at live satellite imagery, a spiral of fire emerging from Antarctica, and at its heart, something massive lifting from the earth like a leviathan rising from the sea. Back at Thorn, Sarah remained. She had refused evacuation, demanding time to observe. Roth had stayed with her, silently accepting the decision. They watched from the last functioning monitoring station as the Leviathan rose into the sky, dragging sheets of ice and chunks of the Earth's mantle in its wake. It moved without propulsion, suspended in defiance of gravity. Fields of light surrounded it, layers of orange, violet, and deep, roiling blue. And then the stars themselves seemed to respond. One of the oldest radio telescopes in Argentina picked up a burst. A distant supernova unnaturally synchronized the Leviathan's ascent. Another signal followed, buried in the neutrino flux. Not random, not chance. A call, or a warning. Humanity was not alone, and Leviathan had heard something far beyond the reach of Earth. Sarah's console blinked one final time before the signal overwhelmed it. The message it displayed was no longer raw data. It had been translated by something, some logic woven into the Leviathan's design, or perhaps an echo of the intelligence that created it. For words, we remember the war. The sky above Antarctica ignited in a silent storm of color and shadow. The Leviathan vanished into the upper atmosphere, leaving behind a wound in the sky where the air itself seemed afraid to return. In the days that followed, fragments of its wake fell back to Earth. Sheets of alloy, strands of synthetic muscle, and monoliths inscribed with glyphs no living human could read. Scientists scrambled to study them. Governments panicked. Religious leaders declared the judgment of forgotten gods. But none could deny the truth. Something old had awoken beneath humanity's feet, and it had not been made to protect them. It had been made to fight. And now it was gone, racing toward the stars, furious and remembering. The world unraveled faster than it could react. In the hours after Leviathan vanished into the sky, Earth held its breath. No one quite understood what they'd witnessed. In cities across the globe, people gathered around glowing screens, whispering prayers or curses, watching as grainy footage replayed over and over. The impossible machine rising from Antarctica, wrapped in flame and ice. Conspiracy theories exploded. Experts contradicted each other on air. Governments fell silent. In orbit, 32 satellites failed in the span of 6 minutes. Their last transmissions captured streaks of light carving trails across the thermosphere, like harbingers dragging heat behind them. The International Space Station, briefly illuminated by the phenomenon, went dark. Colonel Marcus Ross stood at a makeshift command post in Patagonia, one of the last functioning uplink stations. He hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. Blood veined his eyes, but his posture remained rigid, commanding. Around him, a skeleton crew of analysts and field officers worked with grim focus, trying to compile a picture from shattered fragments of data. China is offline. Full blackout across their military networks, one technician muttered. Same with Russia, said another. NATO's in contingency lockdown. All Level 1 personnel have been recalled underground. Roth didn't speak. He stared at the display, a grainy image of the stratosphere where Leviathan had disappeared, framed by an ultraviolet corona no one could explain. He turned to Dr. Sarah Malik, who had been flown in under classified emergency protocol. She looked worse than he did. Her voice had become quiet since Thorn, every word carefully measured, as if afraid to provoke something. I told you, she said. It wasn't built by us. It wasn't meant for us. Roth didn't reply. His eyes narrowed. Do you think it'll come back? She asked after a long silence. I think it never left, he said. Across the Pacific, in a dimly lit lab beneath Tokyo, a team of linguists and code breakers pored over the fragments Leviathan left behind. One slab in particular, a black monolith etched with impossible curves, emitted low pulses in fractal rhythms. The lead researcher had gone blind after 32 hours of exposure. He said the glyphs were moving. Around the same time, deep-sea sensors in the Indian Ocean detected tremors. Perfectly timed, symmetrical, like something immense was speaking through tectonic pressure. The planet wasn't just reacting. It was being rewritten. Within days, atmospheric irregularities spread. The aurora appeared over the Sahara. Birds migrated in reverse patterns. Planes reported compass drift, even in clear skies. Something was interfering with the Earth's magnetic field. And then came the scream. It wasn't sound. It was data, a full-spectrum electromagnetic burst that surged through every satellite, phone, submarine, and cable. For 6 seconds, all digital systems were flooded with static, laced with images too fast for the eye to follow. But frame by frame, analysts isolated them, Stars being consumed, machines fighting in silence, a spiral of darkness drawing entire systems into itself. The scream didn't target Earth. It was a message sent outward into space. A warning. Roth watched the playback with a clenched jaw. It's broadcasting. Or challenging, Sarah murmured. 2 hours later, the retaliation came. A rift opened in near orbit, a perfect black ring swallowing starlight like a whirlpool. From it emerged a shape that defied orientation, an angular mass shifting with every frame, trailing fire and debris. It rotated in impossible ways, stretching space around it. Before anyone could name it, it struck. A focus beam lanced through the atmosphere, striking the ocean near Guam. The energy release was equivalent to 1,000 nuclear detonations. Water vaporized. Coastal cities were hit with shock waves. Power grids across Asia collapsed. Panic swept the globe. Governments scrambled to respond, but military satellites remained blind. Missile defense systems failed. Stealth drones deployed to intercept vanished without trace. Whatever the enemy was, it operated on principles Earth science could barely detect, much less fight. But the Leviathan had left them something. In the ruins of Thorn Base, buried under collapsed ice shelves, a recovery team unearthed a glowing node, still humming with residual energy. It responded to human proximity with encoded bursts of light, images and schematics. In a fortified lab in Colorado, Sarah interpreted what she could. It wasn't a weapon. It was a command matrix, a neural interface, too complex for human use, but designed for activation. It's like a key, she said, but not to open something, to control something. Roth nodded grimly. Then we find out what. As Earth burned under celestial fire, Leviathan returned. It came without sound, dropping from orbit like a god falling to war. Its descent tore open the sky, trailing flares and antimatter contrails. The atmosphere screamed in response, forming vortexes that bent the clouds themselves. Every telescope on Earth turned to follow it, and then it struck back. No visible weapons fired. Instead, the enemy's ship, the angular monstrosity above the Pacific, folded inward on itself like paper under pressure. It imploded silently, forming a sphere of negative light that collapsed and vanished. Moments later, a new aurora bloomed, blood red and rippling, over the hemisphere. People called it a miracle, but Roth and Sarah knew better. This was war on a scale Earth could barely comprehend, and Leviathan was not saving them. It was fighting its own kind. Not all who watched were afraid. Some worshipped. Cults sprang up across the world, praising Leviathan as a returning god. Others condemned it as an omen, but governments had no time for faith. They needed survival. In secret under the Alps, a coalition of scientists and engineers began work on Project Helix, an effort to decode and mimic Leviathan's technologies. They knew it would take decades, maybe centuries, but they had no choice. Earth had been noticed. Roth stood before a live feed as Leviathan hovered once more above Antarctica, not landing but orbiting low. Like a warden, its surface had changed, scarred, glowing from recent battle. Even damaged, it radiated power beyond any human measure. "What is it waiting for?" a general asked. Roth didn't answer. Sarah did. "It's listening." That night, a boy in Senegal drew pictures in the dirt, spirals and stars and shapes he'd never seen. When asked, he pointed upward. "They're calling," he said. "They're not done." And far above the Earth, hidden behind the veil of space, dozens of points of light began to move. The war was never over. It had only just remembered its name. The skies had changed. A month had passed since Leviathan destroyed the entity above the Pacific. Earth hadn't seen another strike since, but the silence felt like the breath before a scream. The stars no longer blinked like they once did. Constellations warped nightly, as if the heavens themselves had begun to turn. Astronomers reported stellar objects moving against known trajectories, entire systems altering course. The conflict was coming closer. Colonel Marcus Roth now operated from Bastion Delta, a subterranean military citadel beneath Greenland's glacial bedrock. It was a last stronghold fortified with both conventional defense protocols and newly integrated Leviathan tech. Patches of translated glyphs and fractured algorithms stitched into Earth's best attempt at survival. And they were failing. Roth stood before a war map that was less geography and more abstraction, a digital star chart that pulsed like a living organ. Earth was a flickering node amid a sea of movement. Hundreds of foreign markers, identified as non-natural entities, converged like predators sensing wounded prey. They weren't approaching. They were assembling. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident, but he refused to rest. Sarah Malik entered the room behind him, quieter than usual, but her presence sharp as ever. She carried a tablet filled with fresh data, her hair in disarray, eyes sunken from sleeplessness, yet burning with a clarity that only fear could sculpt. "They begun signaling each other," she said without preamble. Roth didn't turn. "How many?" "7. No, 8 now. Using particle communication outside our capability to intercept cleanly. But we caught fragments. They're not just coming. They're coordinating." Roth finally faced her, jaw tight. Command still doesn't want to acknowledge this as a full-scale incursion. "They're clinging to the illusion of distance," Sarah replied. "They think Leviathan will keep winning. But that thing wasn't built to protect Earth. It just happens to be here." He didn't argue. They both knew Earth was collateral in a cosmic war. Leviathan was not their champion. It was a weapon left buried, a sleeping relic from a forgotten interstellar conflict. And it was not alone. Sarah placed the tablet on the table between them. We activated the interface again. The control node from Thorn. Roth tensed. And it spoke. Those 2 words froze him. He stared. "It used our language this time," she said, voice hushed. "Not through words. Through us. Neural echoes. Dreams." He narrowed his eyes. "You." Sarah nodded slowly. "It called me by name. Said, Operator 2 identified. Sequence incomplete. I think there were others. Human proxies, or something like us. Operators. Not pilots. Not exactly. It's more like keys. Each of us is a fragment, a part of a greater interface. One that controls not just Leviathan, but maybe others like it, if they still exist." A thick silence followed. The implications were suffocating. "So what incomplete?" Roth asked. "Me," she said simply. "Or the others. It needs more to function at full capacity. And if it's speaking now, that means the threat is accelerating." As if on cue, alarms flared. A new object had entered Earth's atmosphere. Fast, silent, undetected until the moment it passed under the moon's gravitational shadow. It wasn't one of the known invaders. It was smaller, fractured, and burning. It crashed into the Mojave Desert, burying itself 30 meters below the surface. Within an hour, Roth and Sarah were airborne. The crash site was chaos. Military units scrambled to contain civilians, media, and heat signatures that now hovered at record levels. Drones circled the crater, feeding back live visuals to Bastion Delta. What they found was not wreckage. It was a pod, charred, scorched, but still pulsing. And inside it, something alive. Roth stood at the rim of the crater as the pod split open with a hiss that silenced even the winds. A figure emerged, humanoid in form, but unmistakably alien. Its skin metallic and shifting, face masked by a lattice of bone-like armor. It fell to its knees, weak, bleeding dark silver fluid. Sarah approached first, despite Roth's protests. She looked into its flickering eyes, and for a terrifying moment, something looked back. Recognition passed between them like electricity. It whispered, one word, Leviathan. They brought it to Bastion Delta, under maximum containment. It didn't resist. It barely survived. Within hours, Sarah deciphered parts of its neural architecture. It was a scout, a defector, a messenger sent not by Leviathan, but by one of its siblings, another ancient weapon system lost to time. According to the creature's fragmented data stream, there were once hundreds of Leviathans, scattered across galaxies, to defend against a force called the Null Chorus. The Null were not invaders in the traditional sense. They were cosmic erasers, beings not of creation but subtraction. They unmade matter, unwrote physics. They erased entire histories. And now they remembered Earth. Leviathan's awakening reignited the beacon. Sarah said. It told them where to look. Roth processed this slowly, jaw clenched. So the more we use it, the more attention we draw. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. But not using it means we die anyway. The alien's body deteriorated quickly. It had been dying before it landed, and whatever atmosphere it needed, Earth could not provide. But in its final moments, it transferred a final set of coordinates, deep space signals, tracing faint pulses from systems beyond human charts. A final Leviathan, still dormant, buried in Saturn's moon, Enceladus. Roth looked at Sarah, the decision playing between them. Do we wake it? She didn't answer immediately. Her hands trembled as she touched the interface back at the command deck. It pulsed under her fingers like a living thing. We might not have a choice, she said. Far above, beyond the range of satellites, another rift bloomed. Not one this time, 3. And from them came silence, pure and expanding. The war hadn't begun. It had only been acknowledged. The cold of Enceladus was absolute. Nothing stirred on the moon's glacial surface. No atmosphere, no life, just ancient ice sheets layered in silence. But beneath that frozen crust, something vast had been waiting. Something engineered, sleeping beneath kilometers of pressurized frost, sealed off from stars and screams. A ship unlike Leviathan. Not smaller, but leaner, angular, shaped more like a spear than a fortress. It emitted no heat signature, no gravitational pulse. It didn't hum or pulse. It simply was, embedded like a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. Colonel Roth hovered in orbit above the moon inside the Argus I, Earth's first retrofitted deep vessel. Part human tech, part alien architecture, born out of desperation, and constructed in record time by the Global Helix Coalition. The ship was primitive compared to Leviathan, but it could fly and it could carry. Sarah Malik stood beside him, watching as the scanners fed back their findings, none of which made sense. The structure below them didn't reflect radar. It absorbed time signatures. Temporal data bent around it like water around stone. I don't think this one was made for war, Sarah said, half whispering, as though volume might wake it prematurely. It's not weaponized like the Leviathan. Its design patterns are inward-facing. This was built to store something. Roth adjusted the interface display. Then why is it waking now? Sarah didn't answer, but her hand hovered over the node on her chest. The neural interface Leviathan had marked her with. Since the contact, she'd changed. Her mind was sharper, more alert, but her dreams were fragmented mosaics of light and terror. She felt the Leviathans before they spoke. She dreamed the chorus before they arrived. They descended with precision, cutting through Enceladus's ice via high-frequency pulse drills adapted from Leviathan's schematic memories. It took hours. When they finally breached the core chamber, it was as if reality had been rewritten. There was no interior, only endlessness. Roth stared into a chamber too large to exist inside the moon. Geometry twisted inside. Gravity reversed itself every few meters. And in the center floated a crystalline lattice like a blooming flower, vast and weightless, each petal a mirrored surface that shimmered with data. The second Leviathan wasn't a weapon. It was memory. Not a control unit, Sarah murmured, eyes wide. A core consciousness. A library. She moved forward, drawn to the lattice without fear. The chamber adjusted to her. Petals bloomed wider, folding out and revealed rows of holographic fragments. Planets lost to erasure, fleets devoured mid-flight, and worlds blanketed in black silence as the null chorus fed. It's a record of what was consumed, she whispered. Everything they tried to save. Roth remained near the entry. Can it help us stop them? No, she said, but it can tell us how they lost. Above, in orbit, alarm screamed. 3 null entities emerged from hyperspace just beyond Saturn. Each moved like gravity given form, shifting shapes of antilight that shimmered in and out of view, each absorbing stars behind them as if shadows could eat. They hadn't followed the Argus. They had tracked the signal from the waking core. Sarah's connection to the structure intensified, her thoughts no longer entirely her own. The memory Leviathan had interfaced directly with her cortex, pouring thousands of years of loss into her mind. Images of civilizations torn apart in silence, beings like gods collapsing in the wake of the null, filled her vision. But amid that devastation, she saw something else. Wrath! She gasped, voice trembling. There was a third kind, not Leviathan, not null, something in between. They tried to broker peace. Failed. Roth's voice crackled through the comms. And they built one final weapon, she said. A convergence key, made from the DNA of both sides. A hybrid. Roth's eyes locked onto hers. Where? She pointed to herself, eyes wide in dawning horror. Me! In the moment those words left her, the core chamber changed. The mirrored petals folded inward and then flared open violently, sending out pulses that echoed into orbit. The memory was no longer passive. It was activating, awakening not itself, but something stored inside Sarah. The ground beneath them trembled. Enceladus cracked. Far above, Leviathan stirred from its orbit around Earth. It moved without command, powered by its own imperative. Faster than light, wrapped in thunder. It had sensed the activation. The null chorus began to descend. In Bastion Delta, chaos erupted. Global networks received the same signal. An alien cipher translated by Leviathan's interface into a single, harrowing message. Genesis Class Awakening. Final protocol unsealed. Across Earth, people watched as the moon cracked on international broadcasts. Panic surged. But amidst fear, there was awe. Leviathan entered Saturn's orbit in minutes. It didn't attack the null directly. Instead, it folded around Enceladus like armor, merging with the moon itself, binding to the newly awakened core. What emerged was not a ship. It was a construct the size of a continent, part biological, part machine, with Sarah at its center, her body now the signal node between human instinct and alien design. She could feel the chorus. Hear them, not as voices, but intentions, a hunger that could not be negotiated with. The null didn't destroy, because they were cruel. They were cleansing, reversing what they considered a cosmic error. And she, impossibly, was a contradiction they feared. Roth's voice came through a secure neural channel, reserved for emergencies. Are you still in there? Her answer was a whisper in his mind, layered with tones not entirely human. Yes, but I am more. The hybrid construct launched before the null could regroup. It didn't fire weapons. It sang, a harmonic resonance so powerful it bent space-time. The first chorus entity shattered, unmade by sound alone. The second scattered into dimensional fragments. The third retreated, but not in defeat, in recognition. They had found their opposite. Leviathan's voice entered her mind the first time. Cold, precise, ancient. Operator complete. Convergence achieved. Directive burned the silence. Back on Earth, Roth stared at the sky, knowing the conflict had evolved beyond humanity's grasp. They were no longer mere spectators. They had become a variable in the oldest war the universe had known. But as the stars trembled and the echoes of war reverberated across systems, there was one certainty left. Sarah was no longer a bridge. She was a fire between two voids.